Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're digging into something pretty transformative about how we learn, or maybe how we could be learning way more effectively. So many of us, right, we approach learning as this kind of passive thing, sometimes honestly frustrating. But what if the way you've always learned is actually, well, holding you back? And what if you could literally rewire your brain for, faster, deeper learning? Let's unpack this. Our mission today, to explore learnography. It's a neuroscience-backed framework that really challenges those old sit-and-listen models. It shows how doing things, like purposeful actions, can totally transform how you gain and actually keep information. This deep dive isn't just about the what of learnography. It's about why it might be the game changer you need for making learning stick, how it flips the whole idea of studying and shows how much control you really have.
And that control aspect is huge.
Hmm.
This isn't just some, interesting theory locked away in academia. The implications are really quite profound for anyone like you listening who wants to truly nail new knowledge quickly, thoroughly, and in a way that genuinely sticks, not just for a test, but for life. For applying it, we're talking about a dynamic process, something you can actually measure, that fundamentally changes how we interact with information and how our brains respond.
Yeah, I think most of us grew up thinking learning was, memorizing definitions or sitting through lectures hoping it sinks in somehow. We've all done it, right? Trying to cram by just reading the textbook over and over, feeling like you're just hitting a wall. But this is where learnography just completely upends that whole view.
Precisely. The core idea in learnography is that learning is this dynamic process of literally rewiring your brain. But it happens through purposeful active engagement. It's much less about what you just hear or passively read and way more about what you actively do. So in this framework, things like motor science and object language take the lead. It's about ensuring knowledge is acquired by doing, not just passively absorbing. And this taps directly into neuroplasticity, that incredible ability of the brain we hear about, to constantly reorganize itself based on what we do. Learnography basically gives us a deliberate playbook to harness that power systematically. When you're doing these active, purposeful things, you involve the sensory systems, the motor systems, and the cognitive systems all at once. This kind of multi-system engagement. It creates richer, much more robust neural pathways. That means deeper retention, faster recall, which is, well, it's a world away from the often fleeting grasp you get from just listening passively.
Okay, so it really sounds like a complete shift, moving from just absorbing to actively participating. But for someone who spent their whole life in what you might call talking schools, this could sound a bit abstract. Can you give a really concrete example? How could I use one of these purposeful actions right now? Say if I'm learning new software or maybe a language. Beyond just clicking around or flashcards, what are these key components driving the rewiring?
That's a great question because it gets to the heart of it. Doing isn't just random activity. It's structured, it's purposeful. There are three core elements really that drive this brain rewiring. First, there's motor science. This directly connects knowledge with movement and practice. Think about learning a complex dance. You wouldn't just watch a video, right? You'd get up, you'd practice the steps, feel your body move, adjust your balance. That's motor science in action. Or imagine physically tracing a complex diagram, maybe an engine part or a biological process, literally feeling the flow with your hand as you draw. That physical engagement built a much stronger, more kind of embodied connection than just staring at a page.
Right. So less like my attempts at parallel parking, which involve a lot of fumbling, and more like that smooth, almost unconscious skill you see experts have. That definitely sounds better.
Exactly. Then second, you have object language. This is a really powerful shift. It replaces long, purely verbal explanations with things like book reading focused on tasks, writing out steps using diagrams, building models, symbolic actions. So instead of just abstract words floating around, you're interacting with concrete, tangible things. Learning about the solar system, it's not just reading facts. It's maybe building a model or drawing the orbits to scale or using gestures to show gravity. It's about moving from the purely abstract to things your brain can almost literally grab onto.
Turning concepts into something you can actually touch or see in your mind's eye.
Yeah.
I like that.
And the third piece is task performance. This makes it clear that the goal isn't just imitation. It's about engaging learners and applying the knowledge. It stresses the active problem-solving side of real learning. It's not enough to watch a cooking show. You need to actually do it. Measure the ingredients, chop things, handle the heat, figure out what went wrong, adapt. That's task performance. And what's really compelling is how these three elements, motor science, object language, task performance, they work together. They stimulate specific neural pathways, and with repetition, they strengthen them, building these long-term accessible knowledge modules in your brain.
That idea of building something through repeated action really clicks, which brings us to this concept of brain page development and brain page modules. Sounds almost like the ultimate mental filing system. So, what exactly is a brain page? How does the brain build this blueprint?
Okay, so a brain page is essentially a mental blueprint. It's created through these repeated purposeful actions. The framework calls these actions cycles aid. Think of cycles aid as systematic, structured cycles of doing. You do something, you refine it, you do it again better. These cycles progressively build and refine this mental structure, this brain page. Imagine your brain constructing this super efficient multi-layered file for specific knowledge or a skill. And these brain pages are incredibly powerful because they store both explicit knowledge, facts, steps, definitions, and the tacit knowledge. That's the tricky stuff. The skills, the timing, the intuition, the feel for something. Think about riding a bike. The explicit steps, push pedals, steer. But the real skill is tacit. The balance, anticipating turns, those tiny muscle adjustments you don't even think about.
Yeah. The stuff that's really hard to explain but makes all the difference between knowing about something and actually being good at it.
Exactly that. And the practical benefits for you, the learner, are huge. These brain pages help you recall knowledge transfer quickly, solve tasks efficiently, and crucially, transfer that knowledge into new, maybe unfamiliar situations. It's about moving beyond just holding info in temporary memory. It's transforming it into these long-term and action-ready modules that you can access and apply almost instinctively, even when you're under pressure.
A mental blueprint for mastery. That's a really powerful way to think about it. But, I can hear some listeners thinking, okay, this sounds great, maybe too great. If learning is really about doing, how do we quantify that? How do we measure it reliably and fairly, especially when we're so used to measuring hours in a seat or just test scores?
That is a critical question, and it's where Learnography gets really practical with a specific metric. Brainpage Hours, or BPH. This is a way to actually quantify the time you spend in structured, action-based knowledge transfer. It goes way beyond just counting classroom hours or pages read. 1 BPH equals 1 hour of documented and successful action cycles. So it's not just being physically present, it's an hour where you are actively building, rehearsing, or refining a brain page, achieving a real, tangible step in that knowledge transfer. And there's a direct, powerful link here. Higher BPH means stronger retention, better fluency, and more adaptability. This system makes learning outcomes transparent and measurable. It shifts us away from passive measures like attendance towards tangible, demonstrable skill. A bit like, how a pilot logs flight hours to prove competence. It's about proving capability through action.
Okay, so if our actions are literally rewiring our brains, that makes you wonder, what's the actual biological machinery doing the work? What's physically happening inside our heads when we really engage like this? The neuroscience must be fascinating, showing how physical this whole process is.
Well, it absolutely is. And Learnography is deeply rooted in understanding that physical transformation through activity. Different brain regions play unique roles. Take the hippocampus, for example. It's crucial for encoding new memories, especially spatial learning. It helps kind of contextualize what you're learning, like remembering where you learned something, which can actually help you recall it later. Then you've got the basal ganglia. These are part of a network that builds habits and smooths out action sequences. They make your actions more efficient, more automatic over time, so you don't have to consciously think through every single step. The cerebellum is vital too. It refines timing, accuracy, precision. Think about the fine motor control needed for, playing an instrument or performing surgery. That's the cerebellum, hard at work. And then the prefrontal parietal circuits are heavily involved. They control higher level stuff like planning, decision-making, problem-solving. So when you put it all together, these brain regions powerfully show that knowledge transfer isn't just a cognitive thing happening in the abstract. It's a deeply motor-driven process. Your brain is literally a physical instrument being shaped and refined by your actions.
Wow, it really sounds like our brains are physically building like a mental muscle through these actions, sculpting themselves in response. And Learnography, it seems, doesn't just give us the tools, but also a deeper framework for how this knowledge gets transferred. Through these 7 dimensions you mentioned, maybe just give us a taste of 1 or 2 that are particularly interesting, just to show the depth here.
Absolutely. These dimensions provide a really nuanced way to look at how deliberate actions reshape the brain for truly deep knowledge. One concept that often gets people thinking is dark knowledge. Now, this isn't about anything sinister. It's about capturing those subtle, often unspoken cues that really drive expertise. Think about a master craftsperson, maybe a chef. They know exactly when something is right, not just by following a recipe to the letter, but by the smell, the texture, the sound, that intuitive feel. That's dark knowledge. It's the intuitive, almost subconscious expertise built up through countless repetitions and really paying attention. Learnography helps us understand and even cultivate that often unarticulated mastery.
Huh. So it's almost like making the unconscious conscious, being deliberate about capturing those subtle expert nuances.
Precisely. And another really vital dimension is block solver. This is about actively learning how to break problems into manageable steps. Now think about a complex coding bug or a tricky engineering challenge. A novice might just feel overwhelmed, completely stuck. But an expert, through this kind of deliberate practice and brain page development, has built the mental frameworks to almost automatically break that big problem down into smaller, solvable chunks. This isn't just a mental trick. It's a learned neural pathway that makes complex problem-solving feel, well, less daunting and more efficient. These dimensions, along with others like the hippocampus, which ties back to the hippocampus anchoring memory spatially, they all work together. They transform learning from something passive into an active and measurable process of brain rewiring that builds genuine, flexible expertise.
This is really, really fascinating. So, okay, stepping back. What does all this mean for how we teach and learn on a bigger scale? How does this learnography framework stack up against what most of us actually experienced in school?
The contrast is pretty stark, actually, and this is maybe the most impactful part. Learnography clearly differentiates between the talking school and the brain page school. The talking school, well, that's what many of us know. It's characterized by teacher-centered explanations and rote memorization. The teacher talks, delivers information, and students are expected to absorb and repeat it back. This often leads to pretty short-term learning and imitation behaviors. You learn it for the test, maybe, but then it fades quickly because you never really built it or used it yourself.
Right, that classic in one ear, out the other kind of learning. You know it for the exam on Tuesday, but by Friday, gone.
Yeah, exactly. Now, contrast that with the Brainpage School. This model empowers learners. They become active participants through this action-based learning we've been discussing. Learners are constantly engaged in motor science, using object language, performing tasks. And the result, according to this framework, it's strong memory, higher motivation, and much greater learner autonomy. Instead of just mimicking, students are actively solving problems, creating things, adapting their understanding. This doesn't just prepare them for exams. It prepares them for innovation and real-world challenges. It fosters genuine competency. And it actually aligns really well with some ancient models, like the Takshila system in India, which emphasized peer learning and practical application. Learners acted almost like small teachers, building and sharing knowledge together.
That's a really powerful vision for what education could be. So connecting this to the bigger picture, what are the wider implications if we started moving towards this brain page school idea more broadly?
Oh, the implications for educational reform are huge, truly transformative. Think about curriculum design. It means shifting away from just lectures and textbooks toward incorporating much more object language, designing task-based modules, and making sure learning is measured through things like Brainpage Hours. Imagine science classes where you're constantly building, testing, iterating, or history lessons where you're reconstructing events using models or role play. The teacher role changes dramatically too. It moves from being the sage on the stage delivering content to becoming more of a facilitator, moderating hardship and knowledge transfer. Teachers become guides, coaches, mentors, helping learners navigate challenges, refine their action cycles, build their brain pages. For learner development, this approach directly nurtures creativity, adaptability, critical thinking, problem-solving skills. All the things we know are essential for thriving in the modern world. And finally, education reform itself could shift, moving beyond just standardized tests based on recall towards more performance-based evaluation. Really measuring what learners can do with their knowledge, not just what they can remember. It's about cultivating genuine mastery and intellectual independence.
It sounds like nothing short of an educational revolution, really, empowering people to truly take the reins of their own learning. So, to wrap things up here, it feels like we've uncovered something pretty profound today, that we are much more active architects of our own understanding than maybe we give ourselves credit for.
Indeed. Learnography really drives home that actions are truly the architects of brain rewiring. By focusing on motor science, object language, and building these brain pages through deliberate practice, it shifts the learner from being passive to being an active builder of dynamic, usable knowledge, and introducing concepts like brain page hours and those dimensions of knowledge transfer. It gives us both a clear framework and, importantly, a concrete way to measure progress towards truly effective, sticky learning. Ultimately, this whole approach prepares you, the learner, not just for school tests, but for lifelong creativity, adaptability, and innovation in absolutely every part of your life.
It's incredibly empowering, isn't it, to realize we have such direct control over how well we learn, how deeply we remember, and how fluently we can actually use new information. So maybe this raises an important question for you to think about after this. How might actively applying some of these ideas change the way you tackle your next learning challenge? Or even how you view what it means to be truly well-informed and capable in this complex world we live in? Thanks for diving deep with us today. We really hope you're leaving with not just information, but maybe a new blueprint for your own brain.